follow the mouse, we have to work with the cannon object. So let's double click on it. Making this logic work requires that we deal with events and actions. They're the most important things in game development in general. And why is that? Events are things that happen at a certain moment of time. So it could be a party that you're going to, it could be a work presentation, or it could be something like a key press. Okay, so you press a key in a keyboard or in a gamepad. So events are things that happen at a certain moment of time, and actions are kind of the reaction to these events. So for example, if you are in a computer and you press the power button, then the action that the computer is going to take is, I'm going to shut down. Okay, you do something and then something else happens. An event happens and an action is taken. So this is how we work. Now, for making the pointing logic, we're going to click here on Add Event. We're going to select Step, and we're going to select the step. Okay, the same name here. So we have a step event. What is this event? This is something that happens every time your game is running. This is always going to be risen. So when we made our room, we opted for changing its speed to be 60. That means the game is going to be processed 60 times per second. This is 60 steps. Okay, so your cannon is going to receive this step event 60 times a second. So this is perfect for checking things at runtime. So while the game is running, we're going to always see what is the position of the mouse and what coordinates the mouse is. And we're going to make that to make the cannon look to the mouse. Now, here at the right, near the actions panel, we have several actions that are provided by GameMaker. They're great. You can make entire games by just using these actions, but for extra control of what the game is going to work, so for giving a better ease to tune your game, it is interesting to learn how to code. So we have to use this execute code block here. We're going to click on it, drag and drop in the actions panel. So we drag and drop, and we're going to see this text editor here. So we're going to write some very basic code. Now, before we draw any logic, before we write any logic, let's start by typing 2 slashes and saying make cannon look at the mouse. Okay, so what happened here? When we start by typing 2 slashes, this is sort of an instruction that is going to say, hey, what you're going to see now is going to be a comment. This is something that is not processed by the compiler. So this is just an instruction. It's just you telling yourself or other programmers what you're going to do in your code. This is very, very helpful. Okay, making clear comments and very useful comments can be decisive when you are going to spend hours trying to figure out how a certain piece of code is going to work, or just seconds by just reviewing that. So we add this comment here. Now, to make the cannons look at the mouse, we need to change their direction. Okay, so imagine we have our cannon here. Okay, so it's pointing to the right. By default, every object in GameMaker contains sort of an arrow that is pointing to the right, and that arrow is called direction. This is the reason I drew the cannons, these little weapons here to the right, because when you point to the right, this is the default direction. And if you want to make the cannon turn to other angles, to other positions, you have to change that direction. Okay, so for example, imagine you have an invisible circle here. Okay, this point here is 0. This is 0 degrees. This one at the top is 90 degrees. At the left we have 180, and at the bottom we have 270. Okay, and 0 equals to 360 as well. These are Euler angles. It's a number that represents the angle that you are using. Okay, and for searching for the mouse position, for changing this direction, for changing the angle to point at the mouse position, we can use some built-in functions in GameMaker. Okay, we can use some routines that are going to say, hey, I know where my cannon is, I know where the mouse is, so I'm going to get this arrow here. I'm going to get this direction and make the cannon point towards the mouse. Okay, so how do we do this? First of all, let's type var target direction is going to be point underscore direction. Okay, And don't worry, just write this out. I'm going to explain things very carefully to you. We open parentheses. Now we're going to type x, then y. Okay, then we separate these things with commas. Now mouse underscore x, another comma, mouse underscore y. Okay, what did I do here? First of all, when we typed var, we are declaring a local variable. Okay, what is a variable? Variables are certain positions in memory where we store stuff. Okay, and this stuff could be numbers, could be a text, it could be a value that says either true or false, it could be several things. And these positions in memory, they are represented with big numbers. Okay, but this is very difficult to remember. So in order to make things make sense, we can give a name. So I am making a variable that is called target underscore direction, because this is the direction that we're going to use for our cannon. When we add this equal sign, we're telling the code that we're going to make an assignment. Okay, so that means whenever you have a variable and you add that equal sign, when you add only one equal sign, whatever comes to the right is going to be dragged inside the variable. It's going to be stored in target direction. Okay, so for example, if I added 90 here, target direction would be 90 after this line of code runs. Okay. Now, I told you that GameMaker contains a function that already calculates the angle that we're going to need, and that function is called point underscore direction. Essentially, you have to pass 2 points to that function, and it's going to say the angle between them. Okay, but what do you mean with points? What is x and what is y? Internally in GameMaker, you have a coordinate system. Actually, every game or everything that contains a window or doesn't necessarily need to be games has a coordinate system. So we have 2 axes here. We have a horizontal axis, which is called x, and we have a vertical axis, which is called y. Okay, and things that are in the screen are represented with these coordinates. So for instance, let's say I have a little ball here. This position could be something like 10 and then 2, for instance. Okay, that ball here, that sphere here, is in the position 10, 2. Okay, so it roughly looks like this. This is 10 on x and 2 on y. Okay, so when I call here point direction, I have to pass 4 arguments. The first 2 here are the original coordinates, and the 2 last ones here, these last ones, are the target coordinate. So for instance, if we have our, let me clear this canvas here. So for instance, if I have the cannon here and I have a mouse here, okay, we're going to type x and y to get the coordinates of the cannon, and we're going to type mouse underscore x and mouse underscore y to get the coordinates of the mouse. And when we pass these 2 things, we're going to get an arrow that is going to point like that. Okay, so now that we have target underscore direction, we're going to effectively use what we have here. This function is going to return a number that is going to be the direction, and now to effectively change the direction, we're going to type direction equals to target underscore direction. Okay, so internally the direction variable of the cannon is going to store the target direction that we use to calculate. And this name direction, you notice that it is red, is something that is provided by GameMaker. Okay, so it is something that every object contains. So it contains a direction. Okay, this is going to be used for when we're going to shoot. Okay, so all the calculations are going to run properly. But now there is one last line that we need to add. We're going to type image underscore angle equals to target underscore direction as well. So notice that's why we made a variable called target direction, because we use it 2 times here. So in order for us not to type this function call here twice, we store it in a variable, and then we make an assignment to direction and image angle. So direction is the one that works internally. Okay, so we are going to shoot bullets later. Image angle is the one that is actually going to make the sprite of our object to rotate. Okay, and we assign it to target direction. So let's test this out. We're going to click on run the game. Let's wait for the code to compile, and in the meantime our project is saved automatically as well. And after the game opens, we see that the cannon is now pointing at the mouse. Okay, whatever you move your mouse to, your cannon is going to follow. And since we drew the cannon with its weapons here to the right, it rotates properly. Okay, and now we can go to our room here and we can add a second cannon. So we go to the Objects tab, let's make sure that obj underscore cannon is selected, and we're going to click here to add a second cannon. And by just doing that, you can click on Run the Game again and wait for the window to open. You're going to see two cannons and both are pointing at the mouse. Okay, so we wrote a logic just for the cannon object. We added two cannons here and they both behave just the way we intended to. Okay, so in the next video we're going to learn how to make these cannons shoot bullets. So this is going to start to become interesting. To this game, we need to make sprites for them. So we're going to the sprites folder, we right click and select create sprite. We're going to name this SPR underscore bullet, following the pattern we discussed in one of the first lessons. We now hit edit sprite and we create a new sprite. Let's stick with this size, 32 by 32 pixels of width and height should be fine. We're going to double click the newly created image and we should be able to design our bullet. I'm going to make a very simple polygon and I'm going to use outline and fill here. So I select a white outline and then a dark yellowish fill color. So I'm just going to click around and make it look like a real bullet, more or less. Okay, it's a bit rounded here until it reaches this shape. Okay, a bit not exactly what I wanted, but it should work fine for bullets. So this should be actually like cannonballs. Now we click on the green mark, we click again to save the sprite, and let's click on center just to make sure that whenever our bullets are rotated they look correctly. Now we hit OK, and now that our bullet is saved, let's create an object for them. Right click on objects, create object. We're going to be naming this obj underscore bullet. Okay, and on sprite we're going to select the bullet sprite. We can now click OK to save the bullet. Now one important thing we have to understand here. In the room we have two cannons, and these cannons, they are not objects. Okay, there is something that it's a bit funny to understand, but they're not objects, they are instances of objects. Because objects, they work as prefabs, they're like models that you're going to clone, okay, and you're going to add these clones, which we call instances in GameMaker, and add them to the room. So we need to learn how to make the bullets appear in the room. Okay, we need to add bullet instances to the room dynamically, because it doesn't make sense for us to go to the Objects tab, select the bullet, and just click around to add these bullets. Okay, this doesn't make sense because bullets only appear whenever we click the mouse. Okay, when we click the mouse, we are effectively shooting these bullets. So we can't just click around. Now, how do we do this? We're going to the cannon object and we're going to add a new event. So let's click add event, and then we're going to select mouse. We're going to choose global mouse, and then we're going to use global left pressed. Okay, so we use global because we want the clicks to the click event to happen in whatever position I click. Because if we just used the normal mouse, this one, if you used left pressed, this would only happen when you clicked on the cannon. That doesn't make much sense for our game. We want to be able to click anywhere. So we use global left pressed. And now notice that when we went to mouse and then went global here, there were three different groups of events. We have global button, we have global pressed, and global released. Global button would rise, this event would happen while we keep the left button down. So as soon as we click, we're going to see the event, and while we hold it, we're going to receive these events during each step of the room. When we use pressed, this is going to be called only when the mouse at the frame the mouse button is pressed. So for this event to happen again, you have to release the mouse button and then press again. And release would only happen when you release the mouse, but this is not very usual. The most common ones are simply button or just pressed. In this case we use pressed. Okay, now when we press the left button, we want some code to happen. So let's drag it here. First of all, let's start by adding a comment. So we're going to add shoot bullets. Now, notice that if you save this script, you're going to see that the action is called execute a piece of code. And if you have different pieces of code here in the actions menu, it might be a bit difficult for you to understand what piece of code does what. So to make this a bit better, instead of adding 2 slashes to this comment, we can add 3 of them. And when we save this script, then the action now takes the name of that comment in the first line. It's now called shoot bullets. Okay, so what do we need to instantiate these bullets and make them work? We're going to use a function. We're going to use instance underscore create. Okay, and as usual, when we make any functions, we need to open and close parentheses and add a semicolon to finish this statement. And some functions, they receive arguments like we saw in the point underscore direction. To remember the arguments for instance underscore create, if you have ever used it, you can take a look at the signature down here. You're going to see that you have an X, and Y, and an OBJ. So X is the position where we want the bullet to be spawned in the horizontal axis, Y is the same thing in the vertical axis, and OBJ is the object that we're going to use as a model. It's the object that we're going to clone and instantiate a bullet in the game. So whenever we want to put a coordinate here, the positions where we want to spawn the bullet, we can simply type here, for example, 230 and 170. Okay, so in our room, okay, so our room is like this. We have a cannon here, another cannon here. So 230 to 170 would be something around this position here, more or less. Okay, so we have a coordinate here, so that point that I defined contains a certain X position and a Y position, but it doesn't make sense if we just click around and bullets come from the same place. We want the bullets to come from where the cannons are standing. Okay, otherwise they're not shooting bullets, they are I don't know, they're working like mages and spawning bullets in random positions. That's not how it's going to work. So what we're going to do is we want to know what is the X position and the Y position of our cannons. To do this, we can simply type X and then Y. And why is that? Just like we had with direction, X and Y are instance variables already provided by GameMaker. So when you just type X and you see it written in red and you just type Y, you're getting the X coordinate and the Y coordinate of that object. So for instance, if you have a room here and you have for example a cannon in the middle, that position should be 400 by 320. So when we type X and Y internally, it's going to retrieve 400 and 320. So if the cannon was here at the top right, for example, it would be something like 700 and then 80, for example. Doesn't matter what number it is. X and Y are going to return the proper numbers. Okay? So now that we call that, we have a third argument to pass here, which is the object. So let's add a comma here, and we're going to add obj underscore bullet. Okay? So we have our function, we pass X, Y, the object, and we should be done for creating bullets. However, if we just click, the bullets are going to appear on top of the cannon, but they're not going to move. How do we make them move? Let's store the instance that we created in a variable. Let's type var bullet. Okay, so instance underscore create is a function, and it contains a routine of operations that are going to add an instance to the room. However, functions can return values as well, just as we saw with the point underscore direction. And the thing that is going to return is the instance of the object that we used here. So this is a bullet. So we store that in a bullet variable. Now, finally, we're going to set bullet.direction is going to be direction, and bullet.speed is going to be 5, for example. So when we use the dot operation, we're going to access the bullet and change its direction instance variable. And when we type direction here, it's like we are saying self.direction. So the bullet's direction is going to be the same direction the cannon is looking at. Okay, and we also have to use bullet.image underscore angle equals to image underscore angle. So they both are pointing to the same place. Okay, and here we set the speed to 5. So when we have an object, when we have an object instance in somewhere in our room, for example, like here, and it is pointing to a certain direction, when we set speed, we're going to make that object move in that direction arrow that we created here. Okay, let's give this a try. We're going to click on Run the Game now. Let's wait for the code to compile and everything to be ready. And after the code compiles and the window opens, we have our cannons here, and every time we click, we're going to see these bullets appearing in the game. Okay, so notice that they are spawning where the cannons are standing, and their angles are properly aligned with the cannons who are spawning them. Now, since they are big, it's interesting to have a better speed, so let's use 12 here. Okay, and also one important thing about performance is whenever the bullets leave the window, it is wise to destroy them so they are no longer processed. Okay, so we click Add Event, we select Other, and then outside the room, and this is in the bullet object here. Now we go to the main one tab, we're going to use Destroy Instance. Okay, and we hit OK. So when the bullets are outside the room, they're going to be destroyed. Right, so let's give this one more try. We hit play, we wait for the code to compile, and now every time we click, the bullets are moving much faster, so let's use this. This is going to be interesting for aiming, and whenever they leave the room, they are destroyed. We can see that, but don't worry, this is actually happening. Okay, so now we can spam bullets, so this is might be a bit overpowered for when our game runs, so it is interesting to add a little cooldown effect for shooting the bullets. Let's learn how to do this in the next video. First of all, let's go to the cannon object. We double click it and we are here. Let's add another event. We're going to click on Add Event and select Create. So along with Step, Create is also a very important event. So Create is called when your object is ready to be used. So the remote loads, your object instance is also loaded, and whenever Create is written, it means it is ready to be used. So let's drag a piece of code here. We're going to name this with 3 slashes, initialize variables. What we're going to draw here is, to type here is cooldown is going to be, let me see, 500. Okay, so what is this? Cooldown is an instance variable, so it can be accessed in other pieces of code within the cannon object definition, and 500 means 500 milliseconds. Okay, this is the time that we're going to define as the cooldown of the shooting logic. Okay, so we have to always wait 500 milliseconds to shoot. So now we're going to make a new variable here. So last shooting time is going to be 0. Okay, this is going to be tracking an internal clock in the game. Okay, we know how much time has passed since the game has loaded, so this is going to be used for making all the necessary calculations for the cooldown logic. Okay, we're going to use this. So we have cooldown and last shooting time. We now click on OK to save the changes, and we're going to our mouse press here on the shoot bullets logic. Okay, before we make any bullet instantiations, we have to make a verification. So we're going to make an if block. So an if block looks like this. You type if, you open and close parentheses, you open and close curly braces, each of them in a new line. So if blocks, they are used for making questions to the code. So when these questions are correct, okay, so when you ask something that is true, then you're going to run the logic that is here. So let me type run logic. Okay, so for example, if you ask here if 3 is greater than 1, then you're going to run the logic. If you ask if 5 equals to 5 with 2 equal signs, that is true, so you're going to run the logic. But if you ask if apples are the same thing as oranges, then the logic is not going to run. Okay, so what we want to ask here is if enough time has passed since the last time we shot a bullet. And in cannon here in create, we're going to use last shooting time. Okay, So let's go to the mouse press here, and we're going to ask here if last underscore shooting underscore time plus cooldown. Okay, so we ask if last shooting time plus cooldown is lesser than current underscore time. Okay, so whenever we shoot, let's say 10 seconds have passed since the game started. So last shooting time is 0, cooldown is 500, and current time is 15,000 because that's 15 seconds. This is going to be true. We're going to shoot a bullet, and we're going to set last shooting time to be current time. And the next time we're going to be able to do this is when 500 seconds pass. Okay, so whenever this happens, whenever this is true, we're going to set here last underscore shooting underscore time is going to be current underscore time. And now we're going to move all these lines here that we made to instantiate the bullet to be inside this if block. So let's copy that. We need to paste here. Let me just adjust the indentation, and there we go. We set the timer and we create a bullet. So let's give this a try. We click on run the game now. Let's wait to test our cooldown logic, and the game loads. And if we keep clicking, I'm clicking like crazy here, but bullets are spawning only half a second one after the other. If you want to change that, you can just go to create here and do something like 250, which is a quarter of a second. So it's up to you to tune the game until you find a nice cooldown value. Okay, it's kind of a game design task here for you to verify. And if you want it to take longer, you can use 1000, which is 1 second. Okay, you can wait 1 second between each bullet press. Okay, so this should be it for this video. In the next one, we're going to learn how to make enemies, and whenever we shoot bullets at them, they are destroyed. Okay, see you soon.